Behold this Eldritch Horror. This skeletal monstrosity is a primordial embodiment of the annihilation of all things. Who fights a kid and his shape-shifting dog in a cartoon? Huh. This is the Lich, and I always thought he was a little bit too terrifying to be in a kid's show. But sure, Adventure Time is just one weird cartoon. One teenage hero fighting off a creepy eldritch being isn't that big of a deal. Wait, a cartoon where quirky teens ultimately face an eldritch being. I've seen this before. Cartoon where a teen faces an eldritch being. Cartoon, teens, eldritch being. Cartoon, teens, eldritch being. Why do so many terrifying eldritch horrors haunt cartoons? Although people of all ages love these cartoons, children are often the target demographic. Yet, these eldritch abominations are enough to give adults nightmares. Like the beast from Over the Garden Wall, my own personal sleep paralysis demon. I'm Scrawls, and over these past few weeks, I've decided to get to the bottom of this mystery, dissecting ancient tomes of madness, random wikis, to answer these questions plaguing my mind. Why do so many modern cartoons have eldritch horror-inspired villains? What makes characters like the Lich actually scary? And why do so many people seem to be in love with Bill Cipher? I gazed into the abyss, and it gazed back. Do you really want to know the unknowable? Then follow me on this journey, descending into the weird world of eldritch horror in cartoons. Spoilers ahead. To understand this mystery, there are 5 main uncovered reasons that explain why there are so many eldritch horror villains in this slate of cartoons. But to understand, we must first recognize, what exactly does an eldritch horror look like? Bill Cipher is Nyarlathotep, or at least very similar to this Lovecraftian god. Let me explain. Gravity Falls, a lovely town in a lovely show about making summer memories, and hey look, it's our friend Bill Cipher, a dream Dorito who is surely, oh my god, he just rearranged the orifices on that guy's face. What the? Gravity Falls is the perfect example of a modernized Lovecraftian cartoon. The show follows Dipper and Mabel Pines, 2 twins who are sent to live with their great uncle Stan in Gravity Falls, Oregon for the summer. But they quickly discover that the town is full of strange secrets, vengeful gnomes, cryptids, and the undead. Even though it has a TV Y7 rating, Gravity Falls has genuinely horrific scenes. And by the end of the series, the twins face Bill Cipher, a dream demon capable of possessing people and starting Weirdmageddon. He comes from another dimension, aspires for endless chaos, and has schemes that have been brewing since the dawn of mankind. He is a prime example of a modern-day animated eldritch horror. But what exactly is eldritch horror? You might have heard of terms like Lovecraftian, eldritch, and cosmic horror. These are 3 genres that tend to overlap, so I'll explain their key differences here. Lovecraftian horror refers to the works of H.P. Lovecraft, or people who draw from his style. Lovecraft was an author who wrote stories in the 1900s involving strange, otherworldly entities beyond human comprehension. Many of his most popular works are part of the Cthulhu mythos. He was also racist. The terrifying unknown idea of equal rights and basic human decency, ooh. Cosmic horror is a branch of Lovecraft's style that specifically involves the fear that comes from the insignificance of the human existence. In cosmic horror, the individual is drowned out by how vast reality is. Meanwhile, eldritch horror, another branch of Lovecraft, can refer to a couple of different things nowadays. Sometimes eldritch means ancient, so eldritch horror often features primeval monsters or entities that come before mankind and will continue to live on after we all die. However, eldritch can also be used to generally describe stories about creatures that are disturbing, inhuman, and unknowable. The genre evokes uncomfortable feelings, body horror, and an itching terror. Sounds just like puberty, am I right, Pine Tree? Many of the villains I brought up earlier draw from eldritch horror, taking on disturbing forms. However, many merely take on the general aesthetic of eldritch horror without diving too deep into core Lovecraftian themes. Bill Cipher, however, is ancient and disturbing and very much Lovecraftian, taking on the traits of Nyarlathotep, one of Lovecraft's infamous mad gods. Nyarlathotep is an outer god seen as a being of pure chaos. It is associated with the Egyptians and is known as a puppet master and messenger. Unlike the many other eldritch beings of Lovecraft, it shows many visible emotions, specifically delighting in manipulating and hurting people, and causing chaos by taking on different forms throughout history. And it's even known to target those who seek forbidden knowledge. Sounds just like our Triangle Man, a dream demon shaped like a pyramid with a long history of manipulating humanity. Of course, Bill Cipher does have some differences from the Outer God. Gazing at Bill Cipher doesn't immediately drive you insane, and rather than coming from a higher dimension, Bill comes from a lower one, a two-dimensional flatland. So while Bill Cipher is probably not a direct version of Nyarlathotep, the similarities between them are enough to fit Bill within the general definition of Eldritch. This idea is broken down in this article called The Mouse in the Walls, where Tom Miller explains that Gravity Falls takes Lovecraft's ideas and merges them with that good old Disney animated charm. Also, I've gotta say, it's kind of awesome that there are actual academic articles exploring cartoons. We've gotta put more of these universities to work on what really matters. Anyways, Miller writes that Gravity Falls is fundamentally Lovecraftian. He says that characters like Dipper and Stanford greatly resemble the protagonists of Lovecraft's stories. They're scholars who dive deeper into the mysteries of reality and keep records of their descent into madness. And Gravity Falls also shows a bit of that same sense of cosmicism as Lovecraft, since beyond this simple Oregon town lies vast secrets in a sprawling multiverse. So we've established the fact that cartoons are bringing eldritch elements into their stories, but why has it happened across so many kids' shows in the past decade? Part of the answer lies in how terrifying animation can truly be. Imagine it's late one night. You had a boring day of school, your parents went to bed, and you can't fall asleep. Now you're browsing channel after channel on your TV in a dark living room. You're about to head off to bed, when finally you land on this. Animation can be terrifying, despite it being seen as a medium for kids. Animation's strength lies in its freedom. While live-action films rely on the physical world, actual sets, actual props, actual people, and a lot of CGI, animation can portray anything that its artists can imagine. Unrestrained by reality, we get some of the most striking visuals in all of cinema. Real emotions can be portrayed abstractly through surreal worlds, not just feelings for kids. Animation can dive into true human experiences, like love, adventure, and fear. Dude, I never want to see a playground ever again. This is Playground, a short animated concept film by Rodrigo Sosa. It's not an animation targeting kids, yet it shows us the way that animation can be used to capture something both incomprehensible and familiar. Despite being only a few minutes long, with no dialogue or direct plot, it manages to capture the viewer's attention with the sheer horror of monster designs that look wrong. I mean, it would be insane trying to create these monsters and environments as physical costumes or sets, but through animation, the grotesque bodies crawl and scamper. Wary children ventured through unbelievable landscapes. Animation allows us a direct window into more vivid realities, where nightmares can come to life. To be fair, there are plenty of examples of eldritch horror working in movies, video games, and other mediums. Each medium has its strengths. Movies like Annihilation capture a cinematic lens of the unknown, while video games like Bloodborn directly place you, the player, in these nightmares. As seen in Playground, animation's strength is in taking the fun associated with cartoons and turning the weirdness up to 11. With its whimsicality, animation can distort body parts and turn what is familiar into something deranged. Just take a look at these three cartoon monsters. Each takes the familiar natural element of deer-like horns and twists them, changes their shape and makes them horrifying with shadows and grotesque proportions. Meanwhile, in stop-motion animated films like Mad God or Coraline, they use real materials to create environments, and the uncanny blurring of animation and reality makes characters' designs all the more terrifying. Animation allows us to create beings that are beyond what is realistically possible, and works like Playground also reflect the way that artists and animators often braid horror with nostalgia. For example, gaze upon a terrifying cosmos, one where massive Goliaths embody the sun, the moon, and an unending void, a strange plane of reality where towering, unknowable guardians watch over They're Teletubbies. Artists like Jar's illustrations have taken characters from children's media and twisted them into creatures beyond comprehension, like this council of elder tubbies. Seeing cartoons and children's characters evolve into something eldritch takes our nostalgia and uses it to enhance the creepiness. And in the past decade, indie games like Five Nights at Freddy's and Poppy's Playtime, and shows like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, all play with nostalgic ideas and have gained massive followings. This is partly due to their dual nature, exploring dark themes but with brightly colored, friendly-looking character designs that can be found in kids' shows. This creates dissonance, as visual symbols that we trusted as kids, mascots and toys, become things within the uncanny valley. Things to fear. But those twisted horrors I just listed come from indie creators and don't explicitly target kids with Eldritch Horror per se. What about the mainstream animated shows that do target kids specifically? Let's look back at Adventure Time. As a 20-something-year-old who still feels nostalgic about these shows, I know that they would feel incomplete without the horror elements. When I watched Adventure Time after school eating Lunchables or whatever, I came for humor, but also for creepiness and a world darker than my own, even one that was post-apocalyptic. Watching Adventure Time didn't feel like a lot of other shows. An interconnected story with both comedy and tragedy and lore, and a tone that didn't treat me like I was just a stupid kid. Even if I was. Children's shows for much of television's history weren't usually about vast interconnected conspiracies or world building. Many of them were just funny and silly. There's nothing wrong with that. I love Tom and Jerry. But I remember being so immersed growing up in the 2000s with shows like Avatar, shows with fully fleshed worlds that addressed serious problems. And in 2010, we got shows like Adventure Time. Although it began with a goofy kid named Finn and his dog Jake going on misadventures, as the show went on, it dived deeper into the lore of the world Ooh. Ooh is a world of messed up magic, where greater entities shape reality. Some are of order, while others are of death, like the Lich, the last scholar of Golb. And some are more about vibes. The Lich, while not a god himself, is a relentless monster that serves Golb, an unknowable being of chaos. Like an unstoppable machine, the Lich marches on with the goal to kill all life. And he delivers some of the scariest lines in cartoon history. In one episode, the Lich emerges to terrify two bullies. He says, "Before there was time, before there was anything, there was nothing. And before there was nothing,
there were monsters."
The land of Ooh is one of monsters. It has a vast pantheon and a long history of war and corruption. It feels ancient and mythical. Rather than paving a simple goofball world without any complexity, it assumes that its viewers, even kids, are mature enough to handle lore and cosmic fear. Because they are. As much as it might seem weird to be jump-scaring kids and building nightmarish villains, humanity has always tried to instill fear in children for the better. Fairy tales, which involve beings like witches and demons, began as ways of scaring children into following society. Don't stray the path or you'll be eaten by a wolf. We were taught to fear the unknown. But as society has grown, the monsters we feared evolved as well. So we needed to tell our children different stories. So what morphed our monsters into eldritch abominations? A lot of things. In just the past 100 years, we as a society have reached into the stars, gone to the moon, sent rovers to Mars, and even photographed a black hole. The universe is tremendous, but there is so much to understand. So much we don't understand, so much we will never understand. As the universe grows, our own world shrinks. The internet locks us in and every screen is filled with drama and disaster. We are both increasingly aware of how small we are and of how messed up humanity is. You can't hide this chaos from kids. So the world of Adventure Time is a ruined one, devastated by nuclear warfare, haunted by the Lich. This third reason for Eldritch Horror in cartoons is that stories reflect the fears of society. Eldritch Horror can be seen as the fear of how uncaring the universe is, and how vulnerable the human being is in the grand scheme of things. So it makes sense that the tales children can watch on screen are about twisted, incomprehensible horrors. Tales about knights venturing into dungeons to face demons and dragons, but also looking towards the skies to defeat gods of chaos. For the universe is so chaotic, confusing, and vast, and we are so small. So very small. But while Lovecraft is cynical, these modern works do something strange. They gaze at the abyss and they laugh in its face. Like I said earlier, Oo is formed out of the ruins of Earth, yet 1,000 years after nuclear devastation and the emergence of the Lich, there is somehow a bright world full of wonder. The protagonists of Lovecraftian horror often descend into madness. Meanwhile, Finn lives on. He deals with crushes and bad breakups amid fighting demons and elder gods, but we're not watching a fall into insanity. We're watching a kid grow up into a man, as we grow up alongside him. Lovecraftian horror seems relentlessly cynical, placing humanity on the bottom rung of everything. Yet these shows replace that cynicism with the boundless joy of animation and the relatable struggle of growing up. This is where the fourth reason comes in. Putting Lovecraftian horrors against underdog teenage protagonists is exciting and a fascinating way to portray coming of age and defying this cold universe. With Gravity Falls, Miller talks about how the show is an uncanny representation of growing up, because growing up is uncanny. Adolescence is about learning who to trust and transitioning between the wonder of childhood and the reality of adulthood. Dipper and Mabel find themselves in confusing situations in a town that doesn't make sense, and by the end of the series, they're not only grappling with an eldritch apocalypse, but also what to do now that they're turning 13, now that they're growing up. Despite their differences, unlike the Lovecraftian protagonists, they trust each other and work with friends and family to ultimately defeat their villain, Bill Cipher. To combat the fear of the unknown and the cruel chaos of eldritch horrors, shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time show that we can create meaning and joy even in the face of the universe's indifference. But there's still a big problem with portraying animated eldritch horrors. As each of these reality-defying entities get outsmarted by kids that don't even have high school diplomas, don't they seem less eldritch? When children are the target audience, oftentimes horror is diluted. Animation studios can certainly cook up nightmare fuel, but they can't go too far into gore and sheer terror. Gravity Falls even got complaints over the years from parents who called the show satanic. As a result, the eldritch horrors we see in cartoons don't have as much unbridled fear factor as they possibly could if the show was for adults per se. And another problem is that when serialized cartoons end, we generally want the heroes to win. Heroes don't tend to win in Lovecraft, at least not completely. In many other eldritch horror tales, the heroes go mad trying to comprehend the horrors and face fates worse than death. Eldritch gods are simply contained temporarily or postponed, not killed, and they leave behind unrepairable devastation in the physical world and the mental one. While cartoon characters can definitely die, a show will rarely pit its hero against a villain who can't be defeated in the final episode, especially not in a long-running cartoon for kids. Eldritch beings make great overarching villains since they amp up the weirdness so high. But within the confines of a scripted television narrative where they kind of have to be defeated by the kid protagonist, they become somewhat limited. This leaves them in a strange space where sometimes they become less of a grand phenomenon and more like action figures to be bashed against other action figures. They can become more like characters rather than a big force of unknowable nature. Their otherworldliness that made them so intriguing fades ever so slightly. But it's not always a bad thing. At the end of the show Owl House, the villain Emperor Bellows channels the heart of a long-dead titan. He becomes a massive, squirming, eldritch kaiju. Then he faces the hero, a witch named Luz, in a battle of incredible magic, and Luz kicks his butt, albeit with help from her friends. And while this direct, over-the-top anime battle is far from the style of Lovecraft, I can't deny, it's pretty sick. This is what fun cartoons are all about, having these badass characters from beyond our world and making them fight. And to be fair, while Emperor Bellows was old, he wasn't an ancient eldritch god. He was still in ways pretty human, a human filled with hate, who used dark magic to stay alive, becoming the kind of demonic monster he thought he was opposed to. Yet, in direct contrast to that, the Owl House also shows a strange, empathetic side of cosmic entities. In Season 2, we meet the full form of the Collector, A childlike entity who can move the moon with a simple swipe. Truly an iPad kid from beyond the stars. It's both hilarious and terrifying, especially when his naive morality leads him to turn everyone on the Boiling Isles into puppets for his strange theater games. But instead of banishing this being, the protagonists of the Owl House realize that this entity just doesn't understand humanity. They choose to show the collector empathy, and eventually he trusts them. He fights alongside them. I mean, there's all these stories about cosmic beings infecting humanity with madness. What about stories where humanity infects the cosmic with something more human? The power of friendship. Bill Cipher from Gravity Falls doesn't deserve the same amount of kindness. Yet by portraying an eldritch being as darkly hilarious, there's a part of him that is humanized. He feels pain, he gets angry, he has grudges. We love seeing his antics and obsess over his lore. It's enjoyable to see this somewhat human side of an eldritch god. So although there are problems with presenting eldritch cosmic horror in children's media, it also leads to some really fascinating characters beyond the good old, beyond all comprehension tentacle beast. But at the end of the day, are these villains still scary? We've figured out what might have sparked eldritch horror in these modern cartoons. Animation as a flexible medium for fear, and cartoons are a perfect medium for exploring the weirdness of growing up. I think that they're still scary. These eldritch characters strike at our very core, moving with inhuman and somewhat human motivations, and with grotesque yet familiar designs. But through the ways they oppose protagonists and are defeated by them, we find hope in our own struggles against the confusing inanity of modern life. In the end, these cartoons aren't just for kids. They're for anyone who's wondered what another world would look like. Anyone who's wanted to fight monsters and win. Anyone who's grown up, and against all odds continued to smile, even when the world seemed unknowable. Out of these villains, who do you think is the most terrifying? Like, if you were in a dark alley, who's the one you would least want to see in the shadows? Let me know down below, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for the next video. Thank you. Scrawls out.